Pittsburgh Steelers fans, welcome back to another edition of the Steelers Sunday Night Q&A. My name is Jeremy Betts, here as always with you to talk all things Pittsburgh Steelers. It's been a busy week. We've had the start of the Steelers offseason program of OTAs, the chance for now the rookies and the veterans to all kind of come together for a little bit of team building activities, some team practice, getting in the swing of things. And I've got a special guest on tonight who's been covering this in person. You've probably seen his notes. You've probably seen his posts on X. It's Steelers Now's very own Nick Farabaugh. Nick, welcome to the Steelers Sunday Night Q&A and the Steel Curtain Network. How are you doing tonight?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Jeremy. It's good to be on here, of course. Yeah, as you mentioned, OTAs. It's like football's back, man. When OTAs come back, I could smell a Latrobe. I could smell training camp right around the corner, which is honestly, other than obviously, the games themselves, probably my favorite time of year. So,
Sure.
really looking forward to it.
Man, I made my first trip up to Latrobe last year with my brother, and my dad's a Pittsburgh native, but he was in the military. We never lived up there, but we're all homegrown Steeler fans, right? So getting a chance now as adults to go back for different Steeler activities has been really, really neat. And Latrobe was maybe my favorite thing I've ever done, including games over in Acrisure Stadium. It was a lot of fun to get up that close and see everything. I'm going to have to go up again now that the Steelers have all these different moves that they've made throughout the offseason, and there's just such hype around them. Tell me, just from your experience being there and being in person for some of this, what has stood out to you the most maybe about some of these players that are brand new to the Pittsburgh Steelers this year?
It's a different vibe. Last year, I think the locker room felt different. I felt like there were certain leaders that were already locked in just about every single room last year. Like there didn't have to be a leader that emerged in most of those rooms, other than linebacker that I can think of. Right, and Landon Roberts plugged that in eventually is the leader. But last year you didn't really have that. Kenny Pickett was a leader. Najee Harris was a leader. Deontay Johnson was a leader. You had your leaders kind of all across the team. This year it's just new. Like there's a new vibe to how the team operates on a day-to-day basis. Even when you walk in the locker room, I don't know how to describe it. I feel it's more open. Last year, and this is a pretty bad metric, I feel like, to measure
Sure.
by, but I'll just say this. Last year, if I wanted to go up to a lot of guys and just get one-on-ones, there was about half the locker room I just knew wasn't going to do it. This year, I feel like I can go up to anyone. I've gone up to Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, Patrick Queen. These guys just are actually kind of engaging in openness with everything. And I see that with their teammates too. Like there's willing mentorship all around the team. So it's a different vibe. I'm interested to see how it kind of meshes over time, specifically how Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, as this thing goes deeper into the summer, how that changes the vibe. But right now, it's a lighter mood. I definitely think you can feel urgency with how some of the coaches are working, specifically Mike Tomlin.
Yeah.
I feel it. I feel that urgency that they want to win a playoff game. I feel it. But it's a different team. There's no doubt about it. The very fabric of the team, the leadership factor is just so different with the new guys. I also think the fact Cam Hayward's not there probably changes that too. Cam's like the big guy everybody goes to if whatever's happening on the team. Like he's not there right now, so it's a little different when he's not there. But you have different leaders now. Russell Wilson, all those guys. Who's the leader in the wide receiver room? I couldn't tell you right now. Is George Pickens going to step up? Like I just think there's different guys stepping up to take on new roles. You have some young players that were kind of the mentees stepping up to be the mentors now. So it's different. It's a different vibe. And I feel an urgency to the team right now early on in the process to get this new down and really start the season strong, I feel like.
And one thing we have seen from the Steelers in some recent years has been a lack of urgency to start a season when it comes to actual gameplay on the field, and sometimes a slow start to the season. And maybe getting some more veteran guys in here, especially on the offensive side of the ball, settles that down a little bit. But there are so many new faces that I do think it's going to take time as well for this team to really come together. They're going to have to play some games together, and vibe and everything is absolutely something to watch with a team. But until you see the pads on, until you get that that hitting and games going, it's gonna be up in the air. And I think that that's something that we all need to remember with these OTAs. We tend to get so excited, and I know me for sure. I see all the posts like you're putting out there. Roman Wilson looks the part. Russell Wilson and Justin Fields have incredible practice, and it's looking good. And we tend to get overhyped until the pads actually come on and things kind of break down. I wanted to ask you a little bit about the leadership on that offensive side of the ball. You talked about Russell Wilson a little bit here. Justin Fields to me seems like a guy with plenty of leadership qualities in himself as well. And you mentioned the wide receiver room, and I wanted to ask you, how important is this coaching staff to that leadership dynamic actually this year with Arthur Smith there, Zach Azzani there in the wide receiver room specifically, kind of changing the atmosphere in that room. You can see that on the field. How important is that going to be for the Steelers this year on that side of the ball, specifically with the coaching changes?
Yeah, different vibe. I just mean more vocal coaching. That's been one thing that, I don't feel like with the last regime, specifically Canada and Jackson, that you heard the vocalness of those coaches. Well, I hear Arthur Smith and Zach Azzani multiple times each practice. Azzani has them doing physical drills. I'm talking blocking. He put them on the sleds early last week. I mean, that's the type of thing we're seeing here. Smith is watching the wide receiver group. He's not watching Russell Wilson, Justin Fields. Like, who he's watching is mostly the wide receivers, which I find very interesting. I find that to be an interesting note from Arthur Smith. But he's just a vocal guy. In press conferences, when you talk with Arthur Smith, he's kind of this, laid back, kind of quieter voice. But on the practice field, he's got some intensity to him. And if you don't practice with effort, he and Zach Azzani are going to get on you. Pickens has had that a few times already happen to him. And he's really had to ramp up his effort throughout practice, and he's responded to it to his credit. On the other hand, I see guys like Roman Wilson, giving effort, and I see Zach Azzani teaching. Roman Wilson's been grilled about 10 times through 3 practices. I've watched the wide receiver room very closely, and Roman Wilson has great effort, and I think he's got great traits. I also think the individual drills have been like a rite of passage for him, if you
Sure.
will. He has been drilled consistently, whatever it might be, route running, defeating press coverage, blocking, it doesn't matter. Like, Zach Azzani has been on his tail. So I think he demands effort, and I think guys that respond with effort, he will put more into you. So I do think that is something of a culture change. I think last year that wide receiver room was a little bit more lackadaisical, went a little bit more through the motions throughout these practices. Now it's, if you're not giving it your all, you better match the energy of your coach. Zach Azzani is not a guy where you are going to just lollygag through practice, and he doesn't care who you are. He treats George Pickens the same way he treats, Deuce Watts. Like, that is what he kind of is. And so, this is probably part of the reason Deontay Johnson got traded. I think that, you go back to that, and I think that's probably part of it. But this is a definite culture change from what they want. And again, it doesn't guarantee anything. Like, it doesn't guarantee that this magically going to be fixed. I think there's plenty of questions on Zach Azzani's resume when you look at it. But I also think it's the kind of vibe shift they needed after what the wide receiver room went through last year, which was just this uber talented group that just made your head go, what in the world are you doing about half the time too?
Yeah. I do think when you get down to the nitty-gritty of it, just having stability on that side of the ball where you know what you're going to be getting from the guys in charge. It's proven NFL offense. It's something that you're not just trying to figure it out all the time and constantly be making tweaks to make sure it's going to work. There's some things that are in place that are coming into Pittsburgh now that have a proven track record of working in previous areas. And I do think Arthur Smith probably had a very large hand in the selection of the staff. And when you talk about now the quarterbacks coming in and Russell Wilson specifically, because I think we're all kind of in agreement here. It's his job to lose, and he hasn't done anything, and it's so early. He hasn't done anything to this point to prove that he's anything other than a 100% professional, and he's coming in here bringing leadership and professionalism to a group that, based on all comments that we've been hearing, whether subtle or not so subtle, has been lacking in that room in recent years. So, speak to Russell Wilson's impact, if any, that you've seen so far. And again, acknowledging that it's very, very early in this process.
I don't know if I can say I've seen impact. I've seen communication established between him and basically every member of the offense. I will say that. First got to reach out to everybody. Didn't matter how insignificant the ad was. Like, he even reached out, to guys like Michael P. Ryan, who got signed basically that morning of OTAs. I mean, he does definitely takes the steps to getting to know everybody, to being, he knows what it's like to be the franchise. I think that's something
Yeah.
that you get with the guy like Russ. Even if the play his last 2 or 3 years hasn't been to what his peak play was, he knows what it's like to be the franchise, to be the leader of a team. So I think that's something you get the consummate professional. I know there's questions about his locker room kind of acumen, in Denver. I know that really got kind of aired out. And what happened at the end of his situation in Seattle, he and Pete Carroll had a pretty ugly divorce. But I've talked to guys that played for the Broncos, played for Seattle. They like Russ.
Yeah.
It seems like he's a well-liked guy. Is he a little corny? Yeah. But
Yeah.
that doesn't preclude you from being a good leader of a football team. So I don't think you have seen like a dramatic like impact. I do think what you have seen though is a guy that's been there, done that, knows what it's like. I also think Justin Fields knows what it's like. For 3 years, he was the kind of franchise in Chicago. So I think they have two guys that have kind of been there, know that, done that. And I think both of them exude leadership qualities at the quarterback position, that they didn't really have. They didn't have a ton of stability, even with Kenny Pickett, right? Coming in his rookie
Yeah.
year, he wasn't the guy. He only was the guy really for 1 year where he was the unquestioned QB1. And last year, obviously, the injury happens, and then everything kind of catapults from there. So they needed stability in that room from a leadership perspective. And I think they got two guys that they can rely upon that have been there, done that, kind of know what it's like to be expected to be the franchise quarterback and the leader of an offense.
I think that that's hugely important, and we'll see more of that impact down the road. I'm as far as like the on-field play, obviously we'll see, right? There's plenty of question marks about that specifically for Russell Wilson. I think you would agree with me, even looking back before the time in Denver, you could see some decline in his play in Seattle. Now, whether that had to do with just him or other issues going on within the organization, I guess we'll never know specifically. But the decline has been pretty sharp over now the last 2 years, even though it was a step up under Sean Payton last year. Does this Arthur Smith offense fit his skill set? Because there's some concern about him being able to throw over the middle of the field, him wanting to throw over the middle of the field more than being able to, I think is the question. There's concerns about him holding the ball too long, and how does this offensive line handle that? Does Arthur Smith have a plan for this guy in his system?
It's kind of interesting because I think what Russell Wilson had when he was the top guy was elite athleticism for the position. I think he's lost some of that. He's 35. I think that's natural. But he likes to play this backyard rust ball that I like to call it because it's just backyard chaos. And I think it goes back to one thing, and I hate to say it because, we're in an age of quarterbacks where they come in all different heights.
Yeah.
Russell Wilson is too small to see over his offensive line a good bit of the time.
Yeah.
He actually is. And I think that's why he doesn't throw over the middle of the field a lot, is because I don't think he could see necessarily all the time. And when he was more athletic too, he could slide and move a little better and create lanes for himself to see more. So, with that kind of out of the equation now, he's lost a little bit of the magic. He was never an elite kind of in rhythm pocket passer in the intermediate or quick game. I mean, that was never his thing. It was always create something out of structure or the moon balls, right? Those were the things that made him dynamic. So really, Russ, now an older Russ, kind of has to learn how to create those lanes, how to manage the pocket, because he's not going to be able to create plays out of the pocket as much anymore because guys are just going to be able to take him down easier. He's not as slippery. He's not as quick. He's not as explosive. Now, he did, kind of put in a workout program to where he really bulked up a little bit, got some of that athleticism back last year. I think that's part of what saw the boon. Also, let's be real, going from Sean Payton, Nathaniel Hackett, and massive difference, right, between those two.
Absolutely. Yep.
So you can see that. Now, I think, really what Russell Wilson is a deep ball guy first. I think, when some people talk about the diminished physical qualities of him and how he's washed, they also think that his arm is washed. It's not. He's got an absolute cannon still. The deep ball is still what it was at its peak. He's got a beautiful deep ball. Could still air those moon balls out. And that's why the Steelers have probably, drafted Roman Wilson, signed Quez Watkins, signed Van Jefferson, signed Scotty Miller. These are all vertical threats. Calvin Austin's on the roster. Obviously, George Pickens is a great vertical threat as well. So it fits what Russ does. So really, does the Arthur Smith offense, which is play action, hit the dig right over the middle of the field, fit what Russell Wilson does? No. Are we going to get that same, are we going to get what he did with Ryan Tannehill this year? Probably not. What we're probably going to get is a lot of, deep routes, crossers, overs, different things, shot plays.
Yeah.
The deep game is going to be significant. They're going to air this ball. They're just going to let it fly. I think, Russ's moon ball, his deep ball is elite still, and that's what you lean on. And you lean, he's one of the highest. He has one of the highest check down rates in the NFL. I think the highest actually in the past 2 years. In the NFL. And literally, the Steelers, I don't think are going to hate it if he checks it down. If he can, throw the ball to guys underneath like Jalen Warren and Najee Harris and George Pickens and all these other guys that they feel like can make stuff happen, I think they'll be okay with it. And so we're going to kind of see how it evolves. I don't think the fit is as, it's not a glove-like fit. Like, I don't think it's a perfect fit, but I think they're going to incorporate some different things, and he's going to lean into more of, shotgun-related stuff. I don't think Russ is going to be, under center play actioning as much as he would in a normal Arthur Smith offense. He'll probably be in pistol, I think, so he can see a little better out of there, and they can give him more sight lines. So I think they'll kind of innovate with it a little bit and kind of see where everything works.
And we've seen a little bit of that already out of Arthur Smith with Marcus Mariota in Atlanta. Even Ryan Tannehill's mobility was used in that type of set at times. So it's not a foreign concept to him. I think that maybe that path is the pathway that they go for both Russ and Justin Fields, if Fields were to come out on top in this quarterback competition at some point throughout the process here. Nick, it's been great so far. We're going to go ahead and take a break for our audio-only listeners when this posts a little bit later. For those watching us live on YouTube, we appreciate you all. We're going to get your questions here later on in the second half of the show and also keep talking Steelers OTAs with Nick when we come back here in just a second. All right, welcome back to the Steelers Sunday Night Q&A. Jeremy Betts and special guest Nick Farabaugh. Nick, I really do appreciate you coming on, man. You've been doing such good work for Steelers Now. I kind of want to dive in to your notebooks a little bit here, and I just want to start where you wrapped it up kind of with day 3. And one of the big talking points for me specifically on my shows and listeners of the Steelers Fix and this show will know that I'm pretty concerned about the Steelers situation in the secondary, specifically at nickel cornerback. And you wrote about Beanie Bishop and his mentality and how you think that that's going to help translate to play on the field. I just wanted to see if you're getting a sense from the Steelers that they're comfortable with where they're at with the guys that they have for that position, or is this an area where we're going to see some more moves maybe down the road, but specifically Beanie Bishop, Josiah Scott, those guys that are there now, what do they bring to this offense or excuse me, to this defense right now at that position?
Yeah, I think they're kind of feeling out what they have.
Okay.
I think that's what they're kind of looking at right now. What do they have in Beanie Bishop? What do they have in Josiah Scott? 2 other names that I'll throw in this conversation. Or Thomas Graham, who they added in futures reserve deal, and Anthony Averett, who they
Mm,
just added out of rookie minicamp. So I think they have 4 guys they're kind of evaluating right now to see how they kind of fit into all of this. And I think the openness to add is very real here. I think that's quite obvious. I think it's the same discussion with wide receiver.
yeah.
They're sniffing around this market. They've had contact with a number of slots. They just haven't signed a guy yet. And I think that's because they want to kind of see what they have, or maybe they're waiting someone out, to get them on the vet minimum. I think they did that with Marcus Golden last year, Quan Alexander, etc.
Mhm.
So I think they're going to add someone to the slot room at some point. I think Beanie Bishop, specifically fits their rundown nickel really well. I'm thinking if you're going to create kind of a mesh of guys, I think you want to get a guy that's run down first. I just don't think there's as many of those out there right now. Like if you're
Mhm.
looking at the 3 guys that are out there that are former Steelers slots, you're talking Cam Sutton, Patrick Peterson, and Shannon Sullivan. Sullivan's really the only one that has the rundown component to him
Yeah.
significantly, and even he probably leans more towards coverage. But you can sign Peterson or Sutton to be your pass down nickel if you really want to, and give outside versatility on top of that. But I think Scott, Graham, and specifically Bishop specifically as well, all fit into this rundown mold. Doesn't mean they can't make plays in coverage, but
Mhm.
they're going to be the Art Mollett, if you will. And they've split
Sure.
this up multiple times before, where they have a guy that's run down, they have a guy that's passed down. Last year, that slot corner position really got kind of jumbled up. It was at times Minka Fitzpatrick in there as the rundown.
Yeah.
You had Chan Sullivan in there. Late in the year, it really went to Sullivan and Peterson splitting that up with those reps. I expect, them trying to get Minka out of that. I don't think they want Minka in that rotation anymore. I think they want him more at safety, and kind of roving deep in the free safety area, playing in the box more. I think they had Deshaun Elliott to give him more versatility.
Right.
So I think they're going to look to add another slot. I think Beanie Bishop has this mentality where it's like him against the world. I just think he's been
Mm.
doubted so much. You need to be a little crazy to be a
Yeah.
really good rundown slot. Mike Hilton was that. He
Oh,
was a
man.
little bit,
An
he's
animal.
and like Beanie looks up to Mike Hilton as like an idol of his. I think it meshes pretty well with his mentality. And I think the on the field stuff, he's fearless. He does not care. He takes on, pulling guards and tight ends. And yeah, sometimes he'll get thrown around. He's 5'8". I mean, it happens
Yeah.
sometimes, right? He's 5'8", 185. I mean, he's not a big dude, but he plays fearless. He plays physical. He plays bigger than you think. If you are a slot receiver who is big and doesn't bring the fight, he will beat you up all game.
Mm.
He's a blitzer rundown guy, and I think the other thing that makes him kind of interesting is that he's a ball hawk. He'll get
Yeah.
beaten coverage, but he'll force fumbles, he'll get
Sure.
interceptions. We'll do all of
Yeah.
that. So I think he's got the right mentality. Scott's a little different, a rundown guy still. Was
Mhm.
drafted to be a slot, has experience starting in the slot, got absolutely cooked in coverage well with Philadelphia. But I think if you isolate him to just run down slot, he can do that. He's a good run defender, good tackler. So is Beanie Bishop. Graham's a little bit more of an unknown, doesn't really have a ton of NFL tape on him. His Oregon tape definitely is a physical player, though. So we'll kind of see.
Yeah.
I think Averett's the one guy where he's inside out
Yeah.
coverage, longer. So he's a bit of a different player, but we'll see how this slot corner room kind of evolves. Do I expect them to sign someone at some point? I do. I do expect
Yeah.
someone to come in and fill that role.
Plenty of time for all that as well. And there's going to be a ton of moves during the training camp process in a couple months because other teams will be making cuts and you'll start seeing players become available that you didn't think would be available potentially as well. And I think at what point does the comp formula you're not affecting that at all by the guys you sign? Isn't there there's like a deadline for that, I believe. Or maybe it's just the contract price. I can't remember specifically, but I think you mentioned you mentioned Josiah Scott in Philadelphia getting torched. Everybody got torched in Philadelphia last year, so that's nothing new. That was an issue across the board. So hopefully, the Steelers and Terrell Austin, with his experience coaching secondary, can help kind of calm that down for him a little bit. I think a good transition here is actually to the linebacker room because Patrick Queen is there. You've got the Wilson kid out of NC State from the third round. You've got Landon Roberts. You've got Cole Holcomb kind of waiting in the wings while he's getting healthy. We saw Quan Alexander post a couple days ago now of him working out, and he's not on the Steelers, so they'd have to pick him back up. But you see some guys that it just kind of changes maybe your perspective of what this front seven can be when you've got linebackers who can fly around and make plays. I assume you agree stock is up for that room right now.
Yeah, they added a ton of talent to that room. I mean, adding Queen is their big splash probably of the year.
Yeah.
And listen, him and Roberts work very well together. Patrick Queen has some kind of processing issues sometimes in the run game. Who cares when the bowling ball in front of you is a Landon Roberts? I mean, he's going to destroy things. And so it works. And I think Queen's a really underrated coverage defender. So I think he'll fit in well there. Wilson has insane upside. I mean, the athleticism is elite. I think he's a great blitzer that you can offload on the edge. I think you can do so many creative things with this room as a blitzing package. I just think they have three great blitzers between Wilson, Queen, and Roberts at inside linebacker. They can do so many different stunts and creative blitzes that I think they should look last year. I think they should go to Baltimore last year. Look at what Mike McDonald did with that group and steal some of it. I think that's what they really should do. Add some new blitzes. I think Terrell Austin's weak point as a defensive coordinator has always been his blitzes.
Yeah.
It's always been kind of, really evaluating the front and how to really unlock those guys completely. Well, he's got a great front to work with this year. So I think this linebacker room is stuck up. Holcomb, we'll kind of see where he's at. I think he will be ready for week one. I think, I know there was fear of that. He's looking better. So I do think he is a guy that the more and more time goes on, the more and more comfortable I feel he will be ready for week one. Will he be ready for day one of training camp? I think is going to be the question. I don't really expect to see him out here for OTAs or mandatory minicamp, but if he can be out there, even in a limited capacity for the first day of camp, I think he'll be on a nice roll to kind of getting a role. I don't, if Holcomb is healthy, I think it really brings into question who the starting two are.
Sure.
Now, I think Queen and Roberts work together as a real nice tandem, but you have this really athletic coverage guy in Wilson. You have this really solid, just all-around player in Holcomb. I mean, they can rotate these guys at will by matchup, so they have a ton of options in that room. They are deep. They have a bona fide star in Queen as well. All of them have experience running green dot. Wilson even this early kind of time in OTAs is green dotting. So they're all going to have experience calling a defense too before the season even starts. So this room, man, just keeps kind of it's a big uptick, big upgrade from last year. And that's crazy because I think it was a good room before, the injury bug hit that room, of course.
Yeah. You were talking earlier how at the end of the season, the nickel corner position kind of just went crazy. And that had to do with all the injuries, linebacker, safety, that they were having to move guys around so much that they really couldn't do what they wanted to do on defense. And they still ended up having a top 7 or top 6 scoring defense by the end of the year. I'm really excited to see what the Steelers can look like on D with a linebacking core that hopefully, if they stay healthy, looks to be like one of the best, deepest units in the league, not just in the AFC, not just in their division. It's going to be a really good group. And I agree with you 100%. I think Landon Roberts and Patrick Queen, they mesh really well together. Their styles of play are they benefit each other. And then also, I think it is beneficial if you can just say to Patrick Queen, here's the play, just go make it. I think that's going to be big for him and not having him have to diagnose everything. One question I had for you, how important is Minkah Fitzpatrick being healthy and being able to kind of be the leader in the back half of the defense? Does that help these linebackers as well when you're talking about a bunch of new guys and guys coming off injury?
Yeah, sure. I think it does. I think it helps the fact that Queen and Roberts and Holcomb are vets. So I don't think there's going to be a ton of meshing. I think Minkah has to get more used to working with guys like Deshaun Elliott and Dante Jackson that'll be there and whoever's in the slot. So there will be a curve, but I think Minkah Fitzpatrick this year, they got to get back to what makes Minkah. Like, that's the thing. And so for him, yeah, leadership from that back kind of rover position is where he needs to be. I love Mink in the box. I think Mink is like this special player where he's an elite box safety, free safety, and elite slot, but
Yeah,
he can easily be, programmed around, game planned around in the slot or in the box. I think we saw that last year. And more importantly, playing down that low in the box, it does wear Minka down. And
yeah,
Minka got hurt and missed a ton of time last year. And I think they need him to stay healthy. So I think Deshaun Elliott's going to be the guy that's going to take on the brunt of those. He's going to be what they thought Keanu Neal was going to be. They had to
sure.
pivot to make a playing slot and all that way more than they wanted to because Keanu Neal didn't really work out as a signing. So we'll see where that goes. I think Minka's communication ability is going to help everybody involved mesh much quicker. Of course, it will, because he is a football nerd, and
Yeah.
I mean that to the highest degree. I think he's the smartest dude on the team. I mean, that's when you have some of the guys that they have on the team. I think that's a
Yeah.
very high compliment, and I think he will be a big factor. And I think they need to get him back, being the ball hawk that he is, to really take this defense to where it should go.
Put him where he was an all-pro. Let him do that. Let's roll it back, if you will, with Minkah Fitzpatrick a little bit. Okay, so I've asked you kind of all the hard-hitting questions that I really wanted to. We'll get to some of the guest questions here in a second. But Nick, just a couple more observations from you. I wanted to ask for the offensive side of the ball, if there's one specific maybe like trait of the group. Outside of, you talked about the locker room vibe, the coaching staff already, maybe a trait that this group possesses, or an area where you're going to see some major uptick in improvement and allow the Steelers offense to improve on what we've seen the last few years.
Yeah, if you want to go team overall, and I'll include the offense in it, I think it's speed. I think that is the
I
one
was going to.
thing that really sticks out. This team is faster than it was last year. The secondary is much faster. Jackson alone makes this a fast group. But the offense is faster too. I don't think, adding Quez Watkins and Van Jefferson and Scotty Miller were by any means, great moves, but they can stretch the field and they can fly.
Yeah.
There's no question they can fly. And the quarterback position as well. I mean, you have to add that into the equation. They're faster. So this group is going to be faster. The O-line got more athletic by adding Frazier and Fautanu. This is just going to be a really athletic team that plays in space, that's going to play fast on all sides of the football. I think that's to their benefit. I thought last year, maybe not as much offensively. I never really thought offensively speed killed them last year. I thought there were other things that hurt them more than speed. I thought they had enough speed. But I think defensively is where that jump is going to be just evident. I just thought last year you saw so many after the catch games where guys just burned them after the catch, or you saw running backs get outside of the edge rushers and be able to just run around the secondary because they weren't, either playing physical enough or weren't fast enough. I just thought, the pursuit angles weren't there. This is a faster team. At the second level, they're faster. At the third level, they're faster. At the corner, they're faster. So I think it's going to be a
Well, I think we may have lost Nick. I apologize for the freeze there. Nick was talking about speed on this team, and I really agree. I was going to mention that as my area where I thought the improvement was just astronomical on both sides of the ball. And I do think that you have a defense now that can carry that speed and use it to impact the game. It's not just a trait that everybody's got now. It is something that you can actually see from this team, and they can use it. They can use it as a weapon, especially on defense. I've been in full support of Dante Jackson since he was traded for. I think this is the best CB2 that the team will have had in several years. So I really do think that the Steelers can use this this speed that they have added for good on the defensive side of the ball. And I think on offense too, when you talk about, like Nick was saying, Russ wants to launch it deep. The Arthur Smith wants to run the ball and push the ball down the field. So I think it is one of those things where you're talking about a team that has completely shifted in their philosophy athletically. I think that has to do with and I'm seeing Dennis's comment here. Jeremy, bring your cat to co-host the rest of the show. I think she's sleeping with the little one, so I'm going to leave her out of this time. But I will definitely have the cat show on, or the cat show some night, and we'll get her to answer some questions for us. No, anyway, the Steelers and their speed is going to make a difference on this team. I really do believe so. I think it's 100% an area where the Steelers have improved. All right, it looks like we got Nick back with us. Nick, welcome back, man.
Well, we were talking before about how the weather was really bad.
Sure.
Power just went out, so
Okay.
we got it back up. So that's what
Good
that
deal.
was.
Gotcha. Well, you were talking speed. I kind of finished maybe the thought a little bit there. Is just that's actually something that you're going to see from the defensive side of the ball, and that's going to make a difference in how they can play and attack opposing offenses. Did you have? I don't want to make you repeat yourself there, but was there something maybe? I think one of my concerns has been maybe some defensive line depth. Do you have concerns there, or do you think this group can kind of work through that with the guys that they have?
I think they can work through it.
Okay.
I mean, is the depth elite? No. Is it adequate? I think it's fine. I don't think they have a ton of net negatives. I think Monty Adams is a fine backup nose. I think
Sure.
Lowry will come in and give them backup level play. I think Loudermilk had a nice year last year as a rundown strictly guy. I think he'll fill in there pretty well. I think they have a few interesting cast of names. Guys like Brain Fajoko, guys like Logan Lee. I think there's some names in there that are interesting. And I think, the starters are really where I'm intrigued more than I am the depth. I think the depth will be fine.
Yeah.
They don't have like a star in that depth room. I think it's probably a little worse than it was last year. I think Armin Watts is better than Dean Lowry, so I'm just gonna negative that. But I think Keanu Benton has a potential to be a real star. And I think it really comes down to one, what do you get out of Cam Hayward? I think that's a big question. Does he return to his dominant self? Or is he more of what we saw last year, which was elite run defender? The pass rush game wasn't there. And can they get more consistency out of Larry Ogunjobi? I think that's another one that remains a question. So, the D-line questions, I think, are more about, to me, how does the top perform rather than the depth? But we'll see. One injury there, and I think they are, I don't think they have a guy where they're going to have a ready-made guy to play if there is an injury outside of nose. I think, Monty Adams can step in there and start.
Yeah, and I think a lot of fans at the end of the year were calling for Braden Fajoko to get pulled up into the rotation at least, and now it looks like he probably will at least be vying for that earlier in the season, based on what they do and do not have at the position at this point compared to what they had last year. All right, Nick, we're going to jump into some of these questions here just to close this thing out. We don't have to take too long on the answers, but we'll get into some of these. Danny Owens Jr. Talking about the schedule. What game are you most looking to see the Steelers play this year? Looking forward to see for the Steelers. You got a game that comes to your mind?
Yeah, the game that comes to mind for me, and personally where I want to see, is Dallas. I think it's a good barometer for where they are early in the season. We know what the back half's going to be. Like, that's going to be brutal, right? It's just an awful stretch for them. But I want to see how legitimately close they are to the Chiefs, the Eagles, all those teams, because they will steal a few of those divisional games. They're not going to, go 0-. I've seen some people be like, they're going to go 0-8. I'm like, no chance. They're winning probably 3 of those at least to me. I think they will go at least 25. But I think when you talk about postseason success, like, I think Dallas is a good team. Do I think they're a top tier elite team? I don't. So I want to
Mm,
see where the Steelers measure up there. I think if they can compete there, maybe even win that game, I think it's a winnable game for them. I think we could start to talk about growth areas and how this team is
yeah,
better because I do think this roster is better than it was last year. I also
sure.
do think though that they're going to have a tougher schedule this year, so we'll kind of see
Yeah.
where it goes.
Yeah, it may end up canceling itself out to the tune of another 9-8, 10-7 type season for the Steelers. We'll see. We'll see whether this team is ready or not. Uh, on that line, I wanted to bring up this question here from Gene Smith. Do you all see that this team wants to win, or is it just me? I've been talking about this on some of my shows, Nick, that I think the Steelers view themselves inside that building. They view themselves as a team to contend this year, especially in their own division. I think that they're very comfortable with how they play their division members. And I think despite the tougher schedule, they have a belief in Russell Wilson. They have a belief in Arthur Smith that this is a unit that can be that much better. And then they believe that the floor that Mike Tomlin brings to the squad and the defense as well, that they can compete this year. Do you kind of get that sense as well? You may not agree with it, but do you get that sense inside the building that they think they're competing this year?
Yeah, I think they think that they can win a playoff game. I think
Sure.
that's
Okay.
going to be big for them. I just think that they want this 2016 thing gone. I think they want to have a taste of postseason success. I think it's huge for them. I really think it's a big thing for Mike Tomlin,
Yeah.
who has just heard it, over the last 2 or 3 years repeatedly. Art Rooney's heard it. Omar Khan's heard it. You don't make moves like they did without really wanting that. I still think that they probably view it as a transitional year. And what I mean
Okay.
by that is it doesn't mean that they don't think they can win a playoff game or two, but I do think when we're talking Super Bowl status, I don't think they're, gonna convince themselves they're that. But I do think that they convince themselves that they can fight out in the AFC. I think if they were in the NFC, certainly we can get to talking about them making a run. I think,
Yeah.
that is just the difference between the AFC and NFC has never been more stark. It's crazy how
Yeah.
different the conferences are because it doesn't really matter. The Steelers could win the division, be the 2 seed, and that 7 seed could be any number of extremely good teams. That could be Cincinnati. That could be
Yep.
Baltimore. It could be Kansas City. I mean, it could
Yeah.
be anybody. So
Could be
the
Buffalo
AFC,
again. Yeah.
like you look at the AFC and you can probably tuck yourself into 11 or 12 teams that could be legitimately good in this conference. I'm looking, at teams that are certainly going to be bad. And what the Patriots are probably not going to be good. The Broncos are probably not going to be good.
Yeah.
And I mean, listen, there's other teams. I mean, I could talk myself into the Colts, the Jaguars, the Jets have Aaron Rodgers back.
Yep.
There's just a
Yep.
lot of different things. The Raiders probably aren't going to be good. I don't love their quarterback situation, but they have a good defense, and I like Antonio Pierce, but they probably aren't going to be that great this year. But this entire conference is just an absolute
Yes.
buzzsaw.
Yeah.
So you can run into anything. And again, those 3-6, 2-7 matchups, again, the Steelers could win the division, go 14-3, and host the Dolphins. I mean, that
Yeah.
is not going to be the same level of difficulty on the NFC side, right?
Right.
It's just going to be different. So we'll see. I think this is a transitional year because that O line probably needs another year of growth.
Hmm.
You still need to figure out what quarterback is long term, but I do think that they view themselves as being able to win a playoff game and certainly make it back to the postseason.
I like it. Let's bring up a player we haven't talked about yet tonight, but Afton Ford asks if there's a big opportunity for Mount Washington this year. I think that, a guy who was really overlooked outside of his blocking abilities, do you think he kind of moves into a role where he's used more in the passing game this year in Arthur Smith's offense?
I don't know. I think actually he's going to be even more relied upon in the run game because I think
Sure.
you're going to see, Pat Fryman moved around the formation, used like a big receiver basically.
Yeah.
So, I mean, is there opportunities for him to get more opportunities running up the seam and doing different routes? I think so. I think where he's really going to shine more is in the red zone. I think they
Yeah.
misutilized him a little bit. They were not good in the red zone last year. And I think Darnell Washington can be a really effective red zone threat for them to unlock. So I think that's where you'll see him more. So more opportunity in that regard, sure.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I don't think they're going to be using him up the seams a lot on first and second down in the middle of the field. But yeah, as a red zone threat, I think he can be a big time playmaker. I wanted to bring this comment up from Last King of Scotland because I wanted to get your thoughts on the pass catchers. Let's just label them pass catchers because I want to throw Pat Fryermuth into this mix here. And he says this wide receiver 2 situation is getting overblown. If we look at other good teams around like Detroit, Baltimore, Dallas, Kansas City, Cleveland, they all have one good to great wide receiver paired with a good tight end and a strong O-line. Is that what the Steelers are going for here? Because they don't really have a 1B or a 2A, if you will, like some other teams that you see out there. Is that as big a concern to you as it seems to be to the fan base, though?
So, all right, let's go through these teams. Detroit, I can agree with. Josh Reynolds isn't there anymore. Jameson Williams, but here's the thing. First of all, Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta.
Yeah.
Better than George Pickens and Pat Fryermuth.
Yes, true.
Zay Flowers and Mark Andrews. Cool. They also have Lamar Jackson. Dallas. Yeah. I don't agree that Dallas is in this group. I think that they are CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Cooks, Jake Ferguson. I think that's a better group than one good to great wide receiver and a good tight end. I think that's 2 really good receivers and a really good tight end. KC, I can agree. It's really just Kelsey. Who knows what Worthy and Rice are going to be this year. Cleveland, I think you can probably throw that in there. Amari Cooper and David Njoku. They didn't really get a ton of production out of Moore, or maybe it's different this year with Judy. But I also think, you talk about some of these teams. Detroit, elite offensive coordinator that we know of, really good quarterback. KC as Patrick Mahomes does not. You can't. Anytime anyone throws out KC in the scenario, it's a bad argument. The Steelers do not have Patrick Mahomes. Cleveland, I can agree with a little bit. But I think it's better to have a second receiver. I just think it is, right? Now, they could roll the dice like the Rams did and think Roman Wilson is Puka Nacua. That could happen. It could happen. I mean, I'm not it's within the realm of possibility. But it's very Puka Nacua doing what Puka Nacua did is so crazy for a rookie. And I think Roman Wilson's going to be a nice player. But I don't know if Roman Wilson's going to hit his stride in week 1. He might by week 10. So I don't think anyone, sure, if they can land Brandon Ayuk, great.
Yeah.
But I also think, Pickens isn't yet a bona fide one. I think that's a big part of it. Amon-Ra is. Amari Cooper is certainly, one of the best route runners in the game. Yeah. And you look at some of those teams, CeeDee Lamb, wide receiver 1. I think Kelsey is basically just one of the greatest tight ends to ever play the game. I think Pickens this year, I think that's where this is going to be distinctive. If Pickens can take another leap, and I think he's got another level to his game to unlock. He was really good last year. I think he was a top 25 receiver. But this year, could he take a leap as a route runner and become an elite separator, contested catch guy, athlete? That's where this really goes, I think. Because the reason, the big part of the reason Puka was really able to go off, even without Cooper Kupp, is Sean McVay and Matt Stafford just are so good. I don't want to put Arthur Smith on that same plane. I think Arthur Smith's a really good OC, but we're not talking about, McVay or Shanahan here. I think that's the thing. And so other teams have accentuating circumstances. But I think that they need someone else. I just think they need a guy that can separate or go up on the line and beat press. I think that's something that they need a little bit more. And so listen, I'm going to be real. I just do not believe in the rest of that group. At least in the rest of those teams, I think there are guys you look down the depth chart and at least go, at. They're a little bit intriguing. Maybe you do it with Calvin Austin, but Quez Watkins, Scotty Miller, Van Jefferson, these guys don't really pop the intrigue for me. And I think they'll be very lucky to get a big season out of them. I actually would rank the top 3 wide receivers right now as being Pickens, Wilson, and Austin. I think that's what it is. I think Austin should be the 4 in the season if they add it 2. So that's why I think they need to add it 2. I just think, good teams, really good offenses that don't have top tier quarterbacks generally either have an elite OC, an elite quarterback, or they have really good weapons. And so the Steelers right now, I feel like have a good OC, not a great OC. Have what might be, a very middle of the road quarterback. So how do you make up for that? I think you got to get another weapon.
Yeah. I would love to see them land somebody. The free agency bin is very thin, scraping the bottom of the barrel at this point.
I'm
It would have to be a trade, right? It would have
I
to be a
will
trade
say
at
I'm
this
not
point.
even talking about the Ayuks of the world, or
Sure.
I see people throw out Ayuk and Devontae
Yeah.
Adams, Justin Jefferson. I'm not even talking about that.
DK
I'm
Metcalf.
talking just adding Darius Slayton,
Yeah.
Jawan Jennings, someone like that. I think, that is a 2-3 that gives the Steelers 3 legit 2-3s. Like, that's
Yeah.
what they need. Cortland Sutton. I mean, these are guys that they could add. So that's really what the tier I would shoot for. Now, if the Steelers can somehow, they muster up a nice contract and the trade capital is affordable for them and they really like Brandon Ayuk, go for it. I mean, I'm never going to say don't go after the superstar wide receiver if the price is right. But I
Right.
also think for what the Steelers are going to want for the future, they're going to have to pay Pickens, et cetera,
Yeah.
et cetera. A guy like Sutton, Slayton, Jennings, someone in that tier is more of what they should probably go for their speed.
I agree, and I would love to see them do it. I think the running game is going to be a huge part of this team, but if you're trying too much to rely on one aspect of your offense and you in the end up too one-dimensional, you're not going to win football games in the latter part of the season. When you're going to need to put up points against good teams, it's going to be tough sledding for the rest of the year if you don't have a group that can handle what needs to be done in the passing game at wide receiver. So I do think Pat Freiermuth plays a huge role in this offense this year. I could see him being their wide receiver too, if you will, at the end of the season, but you don't want to make him have to be that in order for you to be good. And obviously, there's plenty of projection going on with this wide receiver room, especially at the top with George Pickens right now, as you were mentioning. Hey, Nick, it's been a ton of fun tonight. I really appreciate you coming on. Tell our listeners where they can find you on X, what type of work you're working on right now. And I think Steelers have another week of OTAs. I'm sure you'll be there.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at X, whatever I guess it is now,
Sure.
at Farba FB. You can find me on there. I'm working on a ton of stuff, whether that's observations, profiles, guys I've talked to. My aim is to talk to all 90 and write about all 90. So that's the plan. Whatever I can do about that, we'll see. And of course, the takeaways notebooks, those are going to be coming out every day after OTAs. There are 3 practices this week. The week after there are 4, and then we have 3 practices for mandatory minicamp. So lots of it coming before training camp.
Yeah.
And obviously when training camp hits, we're going to be fully, covering the entire bandwidth of this team.
Awesome. And be sure to follow everything that SteelersNow.com is putting out there. Lots of great stuff. If you're looking for news and analysis, you've got Nick and a bunch of other guys that are doing great work over there. Derek Bell and his YouTube show is great stuff if you're looking for actual film study on these players and getting to know them. Really good stuff there. Nick, it's been great. I really appreciate you coming on. I'm sure we'll be talking to you in the future as we continue to get info from you from the Steelers. And good luck to you as you continue to follow the team there. Appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. For all our listeners, we appreciate you joining us for this Memorial Day weekend edition of the Sunday night or the Steelers Sunday night Q&A. We'll talk to you next week here on the Steel Curtain Network. Have a good night.